In my own experience, over 25 years as CEO of Learnit, reading books has been the single most powerful tool I've used, and it still is today. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you 5 books that I believe every leader should read. And when it comes to being a leader, I don't just mean someone with a title. I believe that we're all leaders: parents, coaches, small business owners, big brothers, and even individual contributors who want to get out there and lead by example. Now, before we dive into those 5 books, there's something else that I want to point out that I really want you to remember. And this is a great line that I was told by David Katz, who's the founder of Plastic Bank. All right? Learning without doing is treason. Think about that for a second. And so what David is saying here is don't just read 100 books just to say that you finished them. You need to read by being intentional. You need to think about what you're reading and how you can apply it to your everyday life. And that is what I'm going to do in this episode today. And I'm going to share with you what I've applied from reading those books in my professional and personal life. Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead, because we believe great leaders aren't born or made, they're always in the making. I'm your host, Damon Lembi, 2-time best-selling author and CEO of Learnit, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people over the past 3 decades. And I wouldn't have been able to do this without the benefit of reading great books. And I'm super excited to jump in now with the books that I want to share with you today. The first book I want to share with you today is A Team of Rivals by Doris, Kearns, Goodwin, and it's a biography. And first and foremost, I highly recommend reading as many biographies as you can. You could learn so many great things, so many failures and learning lessons from some of the greatest leaders throughout history. So a quick summary of this book: it explores how Abraham Lincoln brought together a cabinet full of rivals, people who hated him, and he brought them together in this divided country to help unite the country back in 1860 when he was stepping into president. And I think there's some very, very important lessons in it. The first lesson, most important really, is embracing diverse viewpoints. So an example of this was that Lincoln appointed William H. Stewart as the Secretary of State. Stewart ran against Lincoln as a top Republican candidate, and he thought he was way more qualified than Lincoln. Lincoln was able to get Stewart to buy in and become his most loyal confidant because he saw that the humility that Lincoln had, that Lincoln thought he didn't have all the answers, and that he was open to listening and growing. And I think as a leader, what I've always tried over the years is to surround myself with great talent, with people who had diverse opinions, and that I could listen to them and learn from their strengths and implement what they had to say. Look, I work with a lot of organizations where I've seen where they've had a yes man or yes woman at the top, and everybody had to agree with what they said. What I found with those types of organizations, they lack growth opportunities, and people don't want to work for places where you either have to agree and their opinion is never heard. So embracing diverse viewpoints like LinkedIn did and creating that healthy conflict was incredibly important. The second point is mastering emotional control. Lincoln talks about how he wrote hot letters to himself. And essentially what he did is when he would be angry or upset with what was going on, he'd write himself a letter and then he'd put it in his pocket or he'd bury it in a drawer. And a lot of those letters never came to light. He never sent them. So I want you to think about a time that you've written an email or a text that you wish you could take back. And this is a great example of emotional intelligence and emotional control. There's so many great lessons from this book. But another one of my favorite lessons before we move on to the next book is learning and adapting. When Lincoln first was president, he was criticized all the time because they felt like he was indecisive and he didn't know much about military strategy. But Lincoln went all in learning about military strategy. He was curious. He spoke to generals. He spoke to soldiers, and he learned from whoever he could, whether it was Frederick Douglass, people who'd give him open feedback and even criticize him right to his face. But he learned to take that feedback. And what did it lead to? It led to him going out and finding one of the greatest generals of all time, in my opinion, Ulysses S. Grant, who I put a link into the show notes for his biography. And Grant and Lincoln, they had the same clarity and vision and goals that led them to end up winning the Civil War. 3 of the top takeaways from A Team of Rivals are embracing diverse viewpoints, controlling your emotions, and learning and adapting. All right, let's move on to book number 2. Book number 2 is Quiet by Susan Cain. Now, in this book, essentially it's about introverts, how introverts work and lead. One great example from this book is Adam Grant, and he talks about how there's a fast food company that he does a study on, and that out of 130 franchises, the franchises who had introvert leaders were much more successful. And a lot of it was because introverts tend to lead by listening first before suggesting. And when you do that, people felt much more comfortable to come up with ideas and suggestions. And I just thought this book was incredible because you always think about how you have all these loud leaders out there and who are charismatic and the extroverts, and everybody wants to be like, or at least you think you want to be like that. But what you don't realize is that, and this is what Susan Cain talks about, is that introverts have a lot of great superpowers. There's listening, which I already mentioned, there's focusing, and there's really creating space for people wanting to be heard. I first came across this book because I wanted to share it with family members who had children who are introverts, and I thought maybe it could really help them out. And what it ended up doing for me is realizing there's power of being an introvert. And I like how in the book, Susan also talks about, I believe the woman's name is Laura, who's a lawyer, who she tried herself to go from being an introvert to being an extrovert. But what she did and what she realized was that once she let her natural leadership style come out, she was much more successful. So Introvert is a great book. Some of the main takeaways are that you don't have to be a big, loud extrovert to be a great leader. A lot of times introverts, like the study showed from the fast food restaurants, are the best leaders through listening first instead of suggesting. And I also want to point out that if either you or somebody you know is an introvert, and they're afraid to go for a leadership role because they think that you have to be an extrovert, this is a fantastic book for them. I've learned some tremendous lessons, and I like to consider myself an introvert. Now, my wife and some of my friends might laugh at me for that, but I highly recommend you pick up Quiet. It's a fantastic book. We're moving on to book number 3, Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath. It's a decision-making book. It's a practical guide that helps leaders overcome the most common decision-making biases in their 4-part framework WRAP. You might find this very surprising, but a recent McKinsey study has shown that leaders spend 40% of their time making decisions. So why aren't you spending 40% of your time learning how to make better decisions? You could start off with this book, Decisive. It's an awesome book. I've read it many, many times. And so I want to take you quickly through the WRAP framework, but you need to read the book to see their great stories and examples to get the most impact out of it. So WRAP stands for widen your options, reality test your assumptions, attain distance before deciding, and prepare to be wrong. So again, we're not going to go through all of these. In the book, the Heath brothers have studies that show that by adding even just a third option beyond just yes or no, helps your chance of success go up from 36% to 63% being more successful in those decisions. So let me give you an example. Several years ago, we were looking at replacing our CFO. And so at the time, it was either yes or no. Do we let him go and we hire somebody else? But in reading this book, I really wanted to press myself and my team to think about what are some of our other options. So we came up with several other options, and one other option that we didn't think about before was outsourcing. So now it's either keep them, let them go, hire somebody new at that point, or outsource the option. And we ended up going the outsource option for the very first time. And if our team didn't think about different options, we would have never gone that route. So getting out of the narrow mindset, binary thinking when it comes to decision making, it's super important. Another idea in the book that I thought was awesome is the 10-10-10. Now, thinking about a decision, what are you going to feel like in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years? That's a great way to look at decisions and even sometimes slow down the emotions. A lot of times that I get really excited about something and I want to jump in and make a decision. But if I look at it like, okay, well, I think about it in 10 minutes, or more importantly, in 10 years, it makes you really stop, slow down, and look at those decisions. I'm doing this a little bit out of order, But reality test your assumptions, the R in the RAP formula. That's all about confirmation bias. Now, we talked about that earlier in A Team of Rivals, but if you have diverse opinions and you're not looking for yes men and women to give you answers or what you're looking for, in this book, Decisive, they really dive deep into better understanding what confirmation biases are and how to reality test your assumptions. Super, super important. I just think it's a fantastic book. And if you're looking for another book around decision making, you got to check out my book, Good Decisions Equal Success, which I did with my great business partner, Candace Porter. And until we move on to the fourth book, I just want to say once again, decision making is so important. Go out, pick up Decisive. It's a great, easy read and practical advice that will help you become a better decision maker. The fourth book is Never Lead Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. I got my copy of it right here. And now, Keith spent 20 plus years studying high performing teams. And what he realized is they moved away from traditional leadership, which is, hierarchy, leaders up here and all the teams down here, to what he calls teamship. That's elevating everybody else in your team. Good leaders have their teams back. Great teams have each other's back. And so in his book, what he talks about are 10 shifts that teams can make to go from traditional leadership to teamship. The most important shift for all of these is going from conflict avoidance, having difficult conversations, to open candor, where you eliminate those water cooler conversations or behind people's backs conversations. And you're able to eliminate these types of conversations and have open candor when people on your team know that you care about them and you trust them and you want them to be successful. You're not going to let them fail. I mean, this is an awesome book. It's a thin book. It's not a difficult read, and you can even implement it like Learnit's doing, our team. It's like popcorn. You pick the shifts that you want to go for. There's diagnostics in the book that can help you rate where your team's at and where you can be moving forward. And there are so many great learning lessons in there. One of the shifts I think is great is breaking down silos and being more collaborative. Another great shift that he speaks about is 21st century collaboration, where instead of having meeting after meeting, that we all know there's too many meetings, that you're able to do asynchronous work in between. So Never Lead Alone is perfect for any organization that wants to go from the traditional leadership, where the leader's up above, which by the way, that gets lonely up there sometimes at the top, to where you have great teams that learn to work through teamship, where everybody learns to hold each other accountable, give each other feedback, and has each other's back. I highly recommend Never Lead Alone. All right, we're at book number 5, AI Driven Leader by Jeff Woods. I'd have to say this is the number one book I've recommended to people in 2025. Jeff's book is a guide to learn how to leverage AI strategically. Here's what I love most about this book. A lot of leaders, they don't know where to start when it comes to using AI. And the ones who do, they treat it like a tool instead of a mindset shift. In Jeff's book, he talks about how important it is to look at things like, how do I do this better leveraging AI? How do I make better decisions using AI? And to use AI as a think partner instead of just a TaskRabbit tool, or even, especially not a thought leader. Now, the difference between a thought partner and a thought leader is if you go and you trust AI 100%, you go out and you write a blog or something and you just throw it out there. That's not what you do. What he talks about is using AI as a thought partner. And I'm going to give you an example exactly how I've used it. So earlier in this year, I built new comp plans for my sales team. And typically what I would do is maybe I'd run it by somebody else in the organization, or I'd just send it out. I took the comp plan that I built, I threw it into ChatGPT, and I used Jeff's approach, his 4 ingredients of high impact prompts. And so what that is you got to read the book to get it right, but it's setting a context, setting a persona, giving it a task, and then having it interview you. So what I did is I took my comp plan, I put it into ChatGPT, and I said, I need your help building a strategic comp plan, and I want you to review the one that I have, and I need you to be a senior sales leader who's built thousands of comp plans, and then I want you to interview me. That's the big part of Jeff's deal here. I want you to interview me by asking me 5 questions one at a time. And that's exactly what it did. And it got to a position where it knew what I was looking for. And it came up with answers that blew my mind. And I went back and forth with ChatGPT all based on what I learned from AI Driven Leader, and it was incredible. At the end of the day, it came up with a comp plan that helped focus on the behaviors I'm looking for my team to deliver on. And I sent it to our fractional CRO, Bob Spina, and he's like, man, this is unbelievable. Again, I mentioned this before. It's really great for leaders who are maybe just getting started with AI or looking to take AI to the next level in their organization. Again, that's AI Driven Leader. Check it out. I'm also going to put a link in the show notes. I want you to watch the interview I did with Jeff on the Learn It All podcast. That's a great start, but go out and get the book. Got it again right here, AI Driven Leader by Jeff Woods. So those are our 5 books. Now, before I do a recap, I got a bonus book for you. I can't leave without recommending The Learn It All Leader. I really think that The Learn It All Leader is a great book for anybody who realizes that great leaders aren't born or made. They're always in the making. There's always room to grow and evolve. The first half of my book is all about being. It's the mindset, going all in, being curious, being humble. And the second half of the book is about doing. So the first half is being and then doing. And the second half of the book has a lot of great practical advice and great stories on decision-making, coaching, examples. And it also gives you an opportunity to learn about how we built great teams over the years. So let's recap and talk about the books that I mentioned today. There's A Team of Rivals. I mean, the number one takeaway from A Team of Rivals for me is just building a diverse team and getting those different opinions out there. Then we moved on to Quiet. The number one takeaway for me when it comes to Quiet is that introverts can be amazing leaders, and also how to work with introverts. Number 3 was Decisive. If 40% of our time is spent making decisions, we need some frameworks to help us make better decisions. Number 4 is Never Lead Alone, going from traditional leadership to teamship. And teamship is everybody elevating in that organization, keeping each other accountable, giving each other feedback, and having each other's backs. Number 5 is AI Driven Leader. There's nothing more important these days than to get involved and start leveraging AI. I truly believe that. And the bonus book, Learn It All Leader, Mindset, Traits, and Tools by me, Damon Lembi. And what I want you to think about is we talked about a lot of the most important skills that you need to be a great leader these days. Having diverse opinions, making decisions, building trust, challenging, and also having the back of your teammates, and adopting and leveraging AI throughout your organization. And before we close out, I want to go back to learning without doing is treason. Remember, when you read intentionally and figure out what are you going to do to apply the books that you read. All right. It's not all about reading 100 books. It's about applying what you read. And I also mentioned earlier, read biographies. There's so many great things that you can learn from biographies. What I'd like you to do now, if you haven't already, is please rate and review the Learn It All podcast on your favorite podcast platform. That's a huge help for us to get our message out. And I also want you to think about somebody who would benefit from this episode. The person I want you to think about is somebody who already understands that it's important to continuously learn and grow and evolve and could really benefit and get a positive impact from some of the books we discussed today. So if you know somebody who needs to get better at decision making, needs to build diverse teams, or learn how to leverage AI, send this episode to them. And until next time, everybody, stay curious, keep learning, and have a great day.